I bet that every single person in this audience right now has at least 50 labels associated with their character. Whether that be their name, their occupation, or just any stereotype that they align themselves with, like being cliquey or shy. Whether we like it or not, humans are wired to seek groups and find where they belong. This isn't all just natural instinct either, and this idea is also pushed into our face by almost every foundation in our society, notably our education and our social circles. And you've likely been conditioned to categorize yourself even from birth. Take the average Canadian, for example. We've been immediately told to start thinking about our careers and what extracurriculars we want to do. At the ripe age of 6, I was being told to write down my job and why I wanted to do it. Obviously, a little bit of preparation never hurt anybody, and it's understandable that our teachers want us thinking ahead about our future. But little expectations and assignments like this are exactly what predetermine us to act a certain way in the future. The effect is lifelong. Like a kid that wants to be a neurosurgeon or something super school heavy is much more likely to throw themselves into some sort of nerdy category, choosing to focus themselves on studying and getting high grades. Setting this expectation can limit themselves from other activities that don't fit within that expectation. Things like going out or getting an average grade can seem much more devastating to these people just because it doesn't fit into that nerdy category. This is obviously a dramatic example. The stereotypes behind these labels have a real impact though, and they continue to affect society more and more. It's more obvious than ever now in the age of technology, with BuzzFeed quizzes and trends flooding our feeds. If you've ever fallen victim to this kind of stuff, or you just mentioned it in class, you've probably taken the Myers-Briggs test. This is my favorite example of group stereotyping. I'm no stranger to this quiz. In fact, throughout my years at Walter Murray, and even while researching this project, I've taken it dozens of times. It is accurate to an extent. I mean, they didn't ask all those questions for no reason, but one part of it really caught my attention and made me think. It was that first letter that bothered me, that I or E. Introvert or extrovert. Just as a refresher, if you don't know what an introvert or extrovert is, it's essentially how we regain energy. Do you feel better after going out, or do you need time to yourself to feel better? The Myers-Briggs test asks specific questions to find this out. Things like, if you're at a party, do you talk to a bunch of people or just stay close to a few friends? Or do you feel like you have to go out a lot or recharge alone? These seem like easy questions to answer, but as I grew older, I realized that my answers changed. I identified as an introvert, but I found that I really wanted to click that option of going out. The truth that a lot of people fail to realize is that introversion and extroversion is a complete spectrum, and everybody has moments on each end of that spectrum. Today, the speech aims to show you that stereotypes behind labels like introverts and extroverts can lead you to limit yourself from stepping out of your comfort zone, and that the categories might not even exist. Okay, well, it's harsh to say that they're not real at all. Obviously, there's some reason that we came up with them in the first place. It all started with Carl Jung, a man devoted to finding out what makes people tick. Why do we wake up in the mornings, and most importantly, how do we perceive the world? He ended up creating two categories, introvert and extrovert, that he essentially defined as the difference between focusing on your inner self versus the outside world. This obviously formed the basis of the categories that we have today. Do you regain energy by focusing on that inner self, or do you need to go into the outside world to recharge? Another fun fact that helps us understand introverts and extroverts is the fact that there's science behind it too. Research by Melissa Hansen found that extroverts on average had more dopamine receptors than introverts, which explains why they need more social stimulation in order to feel the same amount of happiness as an introvert would with less stimulation. So clearly, there's quite a bit of time and observation that went into creating these cast types. What you might notice, though, is that it never has and never will depend on personality. In the modern day, the definition of these categories has shifted, though. Now it's less about energy and more about being outgoing versus shy. Personality characteristics. The problem with this is that it influences how we act, whether we realize it or not. It's been found that that simply identifying as an introvert increases the likelihood of developing anxiety or depression just because it's a negative attribute associated with it. Even if you aren't actually that reclusive, if you identify as an introvert for whatever reason, that attribute will influence your self-image. By associating yourself with those personality traits, you start to adopt them. You might fall further into the stereotype than you naturally are. As regretful as I am about it, I am a victim to this kind of rabbit hole. As I got into my preteens and started being more moody and mopey, the behavior towards adults in my life changed drastically. I'd be invited to an event with my parents' friends, and even though I was the one that agreed to go to it, the entire time would be spent eyes glued to my phone, short responses, and mumbling. I'll let you take a wild guess as to if you think I was an extrovert or introvert at that point in my life. Yeah, I'm sure you said I was an introvert. Just because I identified as an introvert, I thought that I had the right to ignore everyone and be rude. I was told that I was just tired or that my social battery was dead. In reality, I had no excuse to act this way. It wasn't introversion, it was ignorance. Extroverts don't get out of this one either, and that same issue of changing yourself to fit a stigma is still there and still harmful. People who are extroverted tend to develop FOMO a lot more, the fear of missing out. Extroverted people are expected to be bubbly all the time and outgoing, so when they're presented with the opportunity to go and hang out with people, they feel like they have to say yes, even if they're not mentally ready. Identifying as an extrovert doesn't leave room for saying no to these kinds of offers. This can lead to angry outbursts and stress, with no idea as to why you feel that way. And it might even ruin a friendship or someone's mental health if they overexert themselves too much like this. Just because that you energize yourself through social interactions doesn't mean that you can't be in a bad mood and not want to go out. It's okay. Associating yourself with a label also leads to predetermining how you'll feel in a situation. Like, you kind of know how you're going to feel before you even go to an event. That kind of thing. Introverts, who are expected to want to stay alone, are more likely to have a bad time when they go out just because they assume that they would rather be at home at that point. Obviously, also applying to extroverts, staying at home can seem a lot more boring or isolating than it actually is because they feel like they should be using the time to go out. As a whole, the stigmas and expectations behind introverts and extroverts can be extremely devastating towards people's mental health in extreme cases. You might not feel like this applies to you yet. Maybe you don't care about introverts or extroverts. But I guarantee you that this problem of setting a standard for yourself and limiting yourself to it affects you in way more ways than one. Excusing that huge crash out you had just because you're a Pisces. Not doing that TED Talk because you don't do well under pressure. Giving up on calculus because you're just not good at math. All of these things are examples of letting a label dictate what you're capable of. It's part of a bigger rampant problem in today's modern society called a fixed mindset. Fixed mindsets are basically limiting yourself mentally. If you believe that you can't do something, you probably won't be able to do it. This accumulates over years of learned patterns, but it also comes with blindly following labels, like introverts and extroverts. Fixed mindsets will make you irritable more often, and it'll limit your performance, self-esteem, creativity, resilience, and self-awareness. Rather than that fixed mindset where you refuse to step out of your comfort zone, it's much better to develop a growth mindset, which allows you to keep your options open. It's that mentality of you can do anything, even if you can't do it yet. You can't control your anger yet. You can't do a TED Talk yet. You don't understand math yet. It really is as easy as tacking on that extra word. The more you say it, the more you start to believe it. And pretty soon you'll find yourself pushing limits that you wouldn't have even come close to before. If you don't believe me yet, let's look at the facts. Students that were told to develop a growth mindset and told to say that word yet were 3 times more likely to finish in the top 20% of a test. On the contrary, those with a fixed mindset who doubted their ability from the get-go would likely finish in the bottom 20%. One word literally changed these people's grades. So maybe put that one in your study notes. It also helps with that initial problem of introversion and extroversion. Growth mindsets have been reported to reduce anxiety and depression, with those that previously felt a lot of social stressors or loneliness associated with being an introvert no longer having as negative of an impact on their mental health. Extroverts, who experienced extreme cases of FOMO, also benefit from this mindset, as it reduces stress about interpersonal relationships, and it positively correlates with self-security. This makes people feel comfortable in their own skin on their own time, rather than feeling they always have to go out. There's clearly positive effects related to this. And I know that it's not that easy to just change your mindset in an instant, but it does start with little things like adding that extra word yet, or not letting a label restrict your potential. I'm also not trying to say that we need to get rid of labels completely either, just that they're outdated. They're black and white, one or the other, instead of representing a spectrum like they actually are. Even the inventor of the terms introvert and extrovert said himself that he doesn't believe a pure version of either category actually even exists. In reality, we're all something called an ambivert. Ambiverts are a mix of the two groups. Sometimes you need to stay in, and sometimes a day out with your friends is what you need. Everybody is, really, ambivert, and this whole discussion of what an introvert and extrovert really is kind of falls apart when you realize that we're both. This is why an introvert has that one person that doesn't really drain their social battery, or an extrovert has that one spot in their house, or that one hobby they didn't do for hours without feeling the need to go out. Nobody is out 24 hours, and you wouldn't be mentally sound if you were isolated for the rest of your life, but what humans do need is a balance. Those pure introverts and extroverts that fit into their category 100% of the time are actually only a result of a fixed mindset that we talked about earlier, as they refuse to let themselves feel anything outside of what's expected of them. But I'll tell you what, ambiverts don't have to deal with that. You don't have to deal with that. Whether you drop the labels completely or just recognize yourself as an ambivert, you'll find yourself avoiding challenges less, not giving up as easily, and just putting more effort into your daily life in general, as you're not hindered by those mental blocks. Ignoring labels that tell you how to act, and just developing that growth mindset instead will make you feel so much more free, and it has proven positive effects on your mental health. The same goes for ambiverts. Once you realize yourself as one, you won't feel the societal pressures to act a certain way. It all just disappears. You have the power to change the molds that society wants us to fit into, just through these small changes in mindset. So make that change today. Thank you.